Strasbourg in July of 1518 was a city already on its knees. Famine had been grinding people down for months, and the streets carried the particular kind of silence that comes not from peace but from exhaustion. It was into this atmosphere that Frau Trophäa stepped out and began to dance. No music, no occasion, just movement, steady and rhythmic, as if her body had received instructions. Her body had no part in writing. She did not stop. Today we are getting into one of history's strangest and most haunting events, the 1518 dance plague of Strasbourg. If this is the kind of history that keeps you up at night, subscribe and stay with me. People watched her the way you watch something that doesn't make sense, waiting for it to resolve into something normal, but it didn't. One day became two, two became four, and somewhere in that window, watching stopped being enough for some people. They joined her, not because they wanted to. That is a detail that changes everything about how this story has to be read. What was unfolding in those streets was not a performance anyone had agreed to give. The city was the stage, but it had been built by scarcity and desperation long before Frau Trophäa took her first step. The dancers were not entertainers. They were people trapped inside their own bodies, moving toward an ending nobody could predict. In a city that was already suffering and now had something new and far stranger to fear. The movement itself was not graceful. It never was. What the bodies of the afflicted produced was closer to convulsion than dance. Limbs jerking through repetitive patterns, muscles firing without rest, and joints pushed past the point of ordinary endurance. But there was a rhythm to it. Involuntary as it was, the body kept returning to the same motions, the same beats, as if locked into a loop it could not exit. That repetition is what made it look like choreography. It was a structure of dance with none of the intention behind it. The feet tell the most unsparing part of the story. Cobblestone is not a forgiving surface under any circumstances, and these people were moving on it for hours, then days. The skin broke, the bleeding was documented, and still the movement continued, because whatever was driving these bodies forward was not consulting the body's pain for permission. The blood on the stone was not incidental. It was the cost of being paid in real time, visible to anyone standing close enough to see it, which many people were. The faces of these dancers were what unsettled witnesses the most. And reading the historical accounts, it is easy to understand why. The eyes were open but not focused. The expressions were slack. There was a person standing in front of you, moving, breathing, still alive, and somehow not present in any way that registered as human recognition. That absence is its own kind of horror. The body was doing everything a living person does, except confirming that anyone was still inside it. The people in charge looked at hundreds of bodies moving uncontrollably through the streets and decided the solution was to give them a proper venue. City officials and physicians, working from the belief that the afflicted simply needed to dance it out, constructed a stage. They hired musicians, they cleared space and essentially formalized what had been a chaotic, street-level crisis into something with an audience and a soundtrack. The reasoning made sense within the medical thinking of the time, which held that sustained movement might purge whatever had taken hold of these people. The reasoning was also catastrophically wrong. The moment the drums and pipes started, the nature of the event shifted. Music gave the plague a pulse it hadn't had before. The movement that had been erratic and desperate now had something to sink to, something to feed off of. What had been a medical emergency was now, in every visual and auditory sense, a performance. People gathered to watch. The atmosphere took on the texture of a public festival because that is what it now looked and sounded like from the outside. Inside that atmosphere, people were dying. Dancers collapsed mid-movement from heart failure and strokes, bodies giving out under the sustained physical damage of days without rest. The deaths happened on the same ground where the drums were playing and the crowds were gathered. There was no pause, no clearing of the space, and no formal acknowledgement that something had gone irreversibly wrong. The spectacle continued around the bodies because by that point, the spectacle had taken on a momentum of its own that the people who created it no longer had the tools to stop. Thank you for watching. Until the next one.